And if you're looking to come up with a reason to maybe call people in your sphere of influence, this is a good thing to talk about, and it's certainly a good thing to talk about when you're having that conversation with sellers who, like Darwin said, they've got all their equity in their current home. They'd like to buy another home. Bridge loans aren't the same as they used to be. They used to be available on every corner, and now they're much more difficult to find. So what does a buyer do? It's tough enough to be a buyer in this market. And as we work to overcome objections with folks, a mortgage recast is certainly one of the things to talk about. So I am going to share my screen. We tested this before. We'll make sure that it works again. And
there it is. You're good to go.
Okay, great. All right, so that's visible. Thanks, Darwin. All right, so we'll start with talking about what a mortgage recast is. And a mortgage recast is a recalculation of the mortgage loan's principal and interest payment, the loan payment, based on a lump sum adjustment to the loan after closing. So that's a lot of more complicated language than what might be necessary. But in short, you think about a scenario where somebody buys a home, they take out a new mortgage, and then later they have this lump sum of money available to them that they would have liked to put towards the mortgage, but it happened after the fact. The recast allows that homeowner to kind of right-size their house payment to correspond with what would be a new lower loan balance after they did that. So almost all mortgage servicers will permit a recast. There's very few practical situations where it's not available. Jumbo loans come to mind. Usually the jumbo servicers don't want to get into that thing, but by and large, you're going to find that all servicers are going to permit this. At Ross Mortgage, like a lot of independent mortgage banks, we tend to sell our servicing shortly after the closing. All the servicers that we sell loans to permit the recast. Now, this is where it kind of becomes a, I didn't know about this sort of a moment. Recasting is not on billboards, it's not advertised anywhere, and in fact, it's not in the terms of the note. So again, it's not spelled out in the mortgage note. This is done as a courtesy by the loan servicer. The option to recast is not guaranteed. And I guess I say that because you want to give an appropriate caveat and say, 9 times out of 10, the recast is eligible, but there could be a fluke situation in the economy where servicers have to pull back on that. I have not seen that happen in 30 some odd years, but again, it's not the servicer is not contractually liable to allow the recast, but they all do it. Fannie, Freddie permit it, and it's not uncommon. Usually there's a fee, $250 to $400 is what we see to do that. You can almost think of it as like a cheapo refinance. Nothing happens to the rate on the loan. That homeowner simply takes that lump sum of money, says, here you go, Mr. Servicer, I want my loan balance to now be $250,000 instead of $300,000. And for that fee, they will recalculate or recast that mortgage payment for the homeowner. Usually there's a minimum. $10,000 is typical. We have a couple that'll do it after $5,000, but you can kind of see the writing on the wall here. If the lump sum payment to the principal is not great, it's probably not worth the trouble of going through the recast. So $10,000 or more opens the door for a homeowner to have their mortgage recast. So how does this benefit? In today's market, and Darwin teed this up perfectly, we got to think outside the box and think a little creatively. A homeowner with all the equity in their home, that's where their down payment's coming from. Their knee-jerk reaction is, well, I'm just going to write a contingent offer. And that sounds great, except sellers aren't too interested in this market on accepting a contingent offer. So if they can financially support purchasing that home without their equity, then a recast can, like I said, help them right-size that mortgage when it's all said and done. I can give a buyer an option to make a more robust appraisal guarantee in their offer. So I'm actually doing a presentation on Thursday about appraisal guarantees. But when a homeowner has that ability after the fact to pay down their mortgage and get their payment recast, then they've got more flexibility on what might happen with that appraisal guarantee. I'm repeating myself here, permits a buyer to right-size their house payment after their current home sells. So let's look at a quick scenario here. So we've got our home buyer, they want to purchase a $400,000 home. If the offer is contingent, that buyer could make a 25% down payment. Mortgage amount is $300,000, that down payment coming from the sale of their current home, hence the contingent offer. But if the offer is not contingent and the buyer looks at their liquid assets and they say, well, you know what, from this account and that account, I can put together a 5% down payment, then they can write that offer not contingent. They've got the funds available. And of course, they need to qualify for the old mortgage and the new mortgage. That doesn't go away. But now they've got a much larger mortgage than they wanted. It's $380,000 instead of $300,000 if everything had gone according to plan with the contingent offer. So what happens with this? They make that non-contingent offer of $400,000, which is accepted. Whoops, I advanced too quickly. The buyer's mortgage of $380,000 has a principal and interest payment of $2,125 plus PMI of $105 per month for a total of $2,230. Buyer ultimately sells that current home, and now he has his $100,000 in sale proceeds. But he's closed on that new home already. So he's got this fistful of dollars that became available to them sort of after the train left the station. They can use $80,000 to pay down or recast that mortgage to a new balance of $300,000, a new principal and interest payment of $1,681, and a PMI is removed. Now, I used $80,000 just as an example. This is a scenario where that homeowner might be saying, hey, I've got my $100,000 out of the sale of my current home, but I want to hold back 20 for whatever, remodeling the bathroom or whatever the case may be. So the advantage to doing this is that the new homeowner chooses. They don't have to put all of their sale proceeds into that new mortgage for the recast. They can take all or part of their funds and apply that to their principal balance to recast the payment. And that is mortgage recasting. I promised Darwin that I would move quickly and leave the door open for any Q&A that might happen. But again, this is a topic that, servicers, they'll even have separate departments that will do this for homeowners, but it's just not well known. As an industry, we just don't go out there and publish the fact, hey, you can recast your mortgage after you get a fistful of dollars that you want to apply towards the principal. Any questions, any what ifs that we might want to run through that anyone might be thinking about? Yeah, Cheryl, I'm sorry.
Okay. Can we do it more than once? Can we recast more than once?
Yes.
Yes. So that doesn't matter. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So if somebody sells their home and then later wins the lottery, they could do 2 recasts.
Have you had any
that be
problems
across
with
the board, or because I've heard sometimes they'll allow it once?
I've not run into situations with the servicers that we're aligned with that limit it to just one. Not to say that it's not out there, Darwin. I think we're probably looking at a kind of a sliver of circumstances where somebody might have the opportunity to recast twice, but it could happen. I think if I'm doing it, when I recast the first time, I'll put the question out there, hey, if I need to, can I recast again?
Have you had any issues with Rocket Mortgage?
With Rocket Mortgage?
Right.
Well, we don't sell that's almost a loaded question for a competing lenders. But we don't sell to Rocket directly, so I can't really speak to what their policy might be on that as it relates to recast.
Okay, because Quicken and all those, they're right on that all the time, and I wondered because they like to throw in penalties or throw in some more money on top of whatever you're doing. Mm-hmm. That's why I asked.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have great insight as to what their policies might be on that.
Thank you.
Yep, sure thing. Thank you. Mr. Scott Rose.
Tony, how soon after they close on that first house can they do it? And there's no limit on time frame either, right?
Correct. As long as the loan is in place, they can do it. There really isn't a limit as to when. Now, I would tell you that if you're speaking with mortgage people, such as myself, you may hear, oh, that homeowner needs to wait 6 months before they do that, before they do the recast. That's not a policy, but the reason that that's thrown out there is that as a lender who sells a loan to a servicer, if we sell that $300,000 loan or $380,000 loan to a servicer, and then somebody chunks that mortgage balance down to say $100,000, well, that servicer is going to come back to us and say, you didn't really sell us a $380,000 mortgage. You sold us a $100,000 mortgage. So we're gonna clip the revenue that they pay to the independent mortgage bankers such as us. So the only entity that's impacted is the originating lender. Personally, I would never tell a consumer that they had to wait just because of how it might impact me or the company. That's just the cost of doing business. But you may hear that, oh, you got to wait 6 months.
You got a question here, Tony? Hold
Yes.
on a sec. I'm going to pass the mic.
Okay.
So I have a question, Tony. So isn't that a condition of the mortgage? Doesn't the mortgage spell that out, whether you can pay additional principal payments or pay lump payments? Isn't that something at the time you take the mortgage?
That language is, and that kind of falls under the lack of a prepayment penalty. And you are correct. The mortgage does spell out that you can make an extra payment to your principal at any time. What's not spelled out, though, unless something's changed and I haven't seen it, but what's not spelled out is the fact that upon making that principal pay down, that the servicer will recalculate the monthly payment. So that's a great question. If we go into that scenario and somebody pays down their mortgage balance and does nothing, doesn't request a recast, they can do so. Then what happens is their monthly payment actually remains the same, but it doesn't take 30 years to pay off the loan. It might take 22 years to pay off the loan because that same payment is now being applied to a smaller principal balance. So it's really two things. It's the pay down of the principal balance, and you're correct. The mortgage document does say you can do that at any time. But then the second part of that story is, excuse me, the consumer would then say, okay, now after I've paid down my principal balance, I would like my payment to be recalculated so that it is kind of right sized with that mortgage balance.
Great answer. That takes care of it right there.
All right.
What else we got out there, guys?
Michelle has a question. Michelle Geiger.
When they do the recast, does that change their interest rate at all?
It does not. And that's and thank you for bringing that up. I build it up as kind of a cheapo refi, but that didn't really do it justice. Michelle, to your point, the rate stays the same. So there's a fork in the road for consumers. If they have that lump sum of money that they want to apply to their principal balance and the rates are the same or higher, then of course they wouldn't be encouraged to refinance, because why would they give up that lower rate? So then they do the recast, because the note stays in place, that rate stays in place. Of course, if rates are lower and it makes sense for them to do a refi, they have that option as well. But thank you, Michelle.
So if they wanted to change to a lower rate, they would want to go into a refi.
correct.
Gotcha.
Correct.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Great
I have a
question
quick
there.
Question.
Yes.
What is the typical cost associated to the consumer for doing a recast on a loan?
Yeah, we see as low as $250 and as high as $400.
Oh,
with
that's
the
right.
serv-
Okay.
Yeah, with the
Okay.
servicers that we sell to. So it's again, I'll call it a cheapo refinance where the rate doesn't change.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Anybody else?
Any other questions out there, you guys?
This is an easy group. This is
It
the
is.
intelligent bunch, so there's no questions.
Well, you know, and it's, I'll tell you, it's a simple subject matter, which is little known by real estate agents and very little by John Q. Public. But you know, what really brought this to light for me was simply, I've got a buyer and we've found them a home. And we're doing the inspection. As I pull up, he's already here and he's overlooking the lake. I said, "You're kind of excited about this then, He says, yeah, I love the lake." He says, "but this payment I'm going to be going into is nuts." Because he's financing about 500,000 or putting 250 down. And then what we're going to end up doing is selling their current home, which we're hoping they'll have about $250,000 in equity that they would have applied to the purchase of this new home. And I said, "Well, have you ever heard of recasting?" And I went on to explain the whole thing to him. Well, it was just like the weight of the world was lifted from his shoulders, because that payment can now drop regardless of what the interest rates do. He can drop the payment. And the obvious is what Michelle just brought up with Tony. If the interest rates drop, refinance. If they don't, then just apply that bulk sum of money and have the loan recasted.
Yeah,
So,
that's a perfect
Tony, any
point.
final thoughts with it?
Well, those who have heard me speak know that one of the things that I'm all about is, let's have good reasons to call our sphere of influence instead of the cliche, "Hey, do you know anybody who wants to buy or sell a home?" This is a perfect thing, especially if you've talked with sellers they're on the fence, they're apprehensive, they're coming up with, 31 flavors of reasons why not to sell. Well, this is a tool that can be used to overcome an objection if they're concerned. "Well, I know I can't make a contingent offer, and I don't want to do it unless I can get the mortgage to be the right size." Well, the answer, Mr. Seller, is, well, you can. You just kind of have to do things in a different order. And in doing so, I can almost guarantee that you have one-upped your competition as far as providing helpful tips to consumers.
I love it. I love it. So here's one that I remember. Pick me up, I make you money. And I'm holding up my phone, right? I make you money. So what all of us should do here, I'm showing it's 12:19. And with the 11 minutes that you've had blocked off for Hot Topic Tuesday, take your phone, do a quick recording, and just let people know about this thing called recasting. And after that, do exactly what Tony said. If you've sold a home and you know that somebody had a bulk of money, maybe you should just go ahead and have this call and said, "Hey, I just heard something new that didn't know if you knew about." Go online, do a quick reel. "Hey, everybody, just learned something new. And here's what I'm thinking. You could do this," and explain the process.
Yeah.
A great way of being able to get yourself out there in the marketplace, get yourself some exposure, and who knows, might even get yourself some business.
Hey, one
So,
last thought. I'm sorry, Darwin,
yeah,
one
go
last quick
ahead.
thought. Making a video, great idea. Don't go as deep. My suggestion is don't go as deep as we did in this topic. Plant the seed and give them a reason to call you.
Oh,
And
I like that.
more details.
Absolutely right. So that they need to talk to you.
Yeah.
Makes all the sense in the world. Tony, I got one more question here in the office. Oh, are there any hidden tax implications because of doing this? I can think of one.
Okay, hidden tax implications for doing a recast. Well, I'm going to answer as Tony the loan guy and not Tony the CPA. And I'm going to say there probably is not. This is not income that would need to be taxed. Every situation could be a little different, but you're not doing anything that would create a taxable event, in my view. Darwin, did you have a scenario where it?
Well, yeah, and really it's quite the obvious. You're not paying as much interest.
Well,
So you're not having the same deduction. So I guess one way you're being penalized, and on the other hand, you're gaining. And I think you're gaining more by not paying as much interest.
Well, that's a good point. You have less of an interest deduction. Interestingly, with the 2018 tax changes, I know at least in my world, deducting the interest is not as easy as it used to be because of that higher standard deduction. But that's true. If it is somebody who is able to deduct the interest, they would be deducting less because they're paying less. So something to think about.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, hey, we're going to call that a wrap to another Hot Topic Tuesday. I will let you know. I want you to put this down. This could be very exciting for you guys. June 13th, the Hot Topic Tuesday Deep Dive, which is our 1-hour session. will bring us Ask the Attorney. And many of you know Mr. Rick Linnell. He has happily accepted the invitation to come in and talk to you guys. He's asked me to turn in any questions or any topics that you might have in advance so that he can be fully prepared. But know that, yeah, he's going to be out here and is going to be taking questions, all things real estate law. So please send me in advance any topics, any questions, and it's best that if one comes up right now, send it to me now so I can forward that on. So guys, I hope you enjoy it. I'll see you June 13th for Ask the Attorney. And hey, send me any hot topics for what's going on right now, because these Tuesdays are open for anything that we've got that you guys need to know. So with that, that brings it to a wrap. We'll see you next week. Have another great week. Go talk to people. See ya.